Drake is a Canadian megastar, rapper, singer, and actor, and one of the best selling artists the world has ever known. His musical career started in 2001, and it came off the back of starting an acting career in Degrassi The Next Generation, which was a spin off from Degrassi Junior High. He has released 8 studio albums. He has appeared in 5 fictional films and several documentaries. He's also produced documentaries. He's got a long list of television appearances, and is also a businessman of various strings to his bow. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the third album by Drake, and it's my first time listening to it. So I've kind of had this anticipation about doing my first review of a Drake album. Um, I'm not sure I could call it looking forward to, because I was vaguely aware of what kind of artist Drake is, but I know that he's huge. I also know that my knowledge of him has been almost non-existent. And so the thing that I've been looking forward to is actually getting to know a bit more about Drake. Obviously I could have just gone off and read, but there's several acts that I would put in this category, things that one of the reasons of doing this series of reviews is to expose myself to more stuff, and this means that I get to know more about some of the stuff that is kind of currently very, very popular. Um, so it's yeah, it's rap hip hop with R&B elements to it. And let's get the negatives over with first. So there's nothing in that description that will natively, inherently attract me to it. Rap, actually, I found that I'm not uh, intrinsically opposed to rap. It depends on how it's done and what the backing is. Much more, I'm interested in what the music backing is. Hip hop, generally, I'm not a fan. R&B, if you go back to the 60s and the 70s, R&B is some of that stuff I really like, but from about 1980 onwards, R&B has kind of left me cold. There's also in here things that are prevalent in modern pop that are things that I really quite dislike. So there's auto tune, there's I'm going to use the term trap and drill. There's kind of the rhythmic backing is often very tinny, kind of hi-hatty sound, and it's very kind of quick together. Just the way the beats are put together is uh, yeah, the stuff. I'm being vague, yes, but there's a kind of rhythmic uses of the percussion sounds that I'm not a huge fan of, and it's also does sometimes have a tendency to do start stop with the beats, which I know can be done to great effect, but I think is overdone these days. And the musical backing is okay; it's not objectionable, but it's also kind of it's not something that particularly excites me here. It's kind of bits of keyboards and other stuff like that. I wouldn't say that there's particularly samples in here. If there were, they were not noticeable. And I wasn't. So I always feel like if I'm commenting on the flow of a rapper that I'm an absolute fraud here because what do I know about rapping and flow? But to me, I wasn't convinced by his flow. I thought it felt a little bit awkward. It's kind of loose. It's a bit sketchy on getting the scan at the times. And there's at times quite a lot of bad words. So I think rap tends to hit some of the particular words that I struggle with. So every day, swearing is stuff that I don't actually have much of a problem with. But some of the words here, there's an N word which is I used it would be considered extremely racist. There's a B word which if I used it would be considered extremely misogynistic. There's what is considered to be one of the worst terms in swearing around, which is a two-word term. And there's quite a bit of that in here at times. And there's also quite a bit of drug references in here. So that's got all those things out of the way. what I want to do now is to tell you what I think of the positives here as well, and there are positives. So it's hip. I'm going to describe this as hip hop. I don't know if that is a term that exists. If not, I'm inventing it. Let's let this free into the world, which is the kind of poppy end of hip hop. Uh, so it's accessible and, despite the things that I've said, is stuff that people will find approachable. Certainly, people who are open to hip hop. Um, I think the biggest positive here is the lyrics, which are in some ways very well written and very cleverly put together. My favourite bit of lyrics was A B got your CD, you get an E for effort, and it's saying something. I don't know who A B is or whether it's Hey B, but also it's got that whole um, thing with the alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F going on, and nicely put together. And there's a lot of writing that is maybe that's the cleverest bit, but there's a lot of writing that's well written. I also found so my process for reviewing these albums almost always is to do one listen, then do some reading, and then do a second listen. I usually try and listen in different circumstances as well, using different equipment, so it gives me a breadth of experience of the album. And on this occasion, the second listen, I found that I remembered a lot from the first listen. And what that tends to indicate, I think, is that it's very immediate and very recognisable. And this kind of um, speaks towards this idea of it being hip hop. It's a very kind of, once you've heard it, it's recognisable and it sticks in your mind and you recognise it. It's not kind of overly generic all the way through. There's differences and the different things that he talks about. And although there's um, there is, obviously a Canadian accent and dialogue terms that apparently there's some Canadian slang as well as some um, slang from other places. I think I want to say Jamaican. Um, Certainly dialogue terms. I've followed most of it, which is unusual for a rap album for me. So it's accessible in the sense of being able to understand what he's saying as well. He also, having said what I said about the language, I found that later on in the album that seems to ease off, and the attitude, which has been quite full of himself at various points, also seems to ease off. And some of the songs are actually about decent stuff, and they're about relationships, and they're not absolutely laden with foul misogyny. And there's actually some balanced thought going on here in some of what he's saying, particularly about relationships. Um, the best bit to me is the track "From Time." And that's because of the singing of one of his guests. And I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but I think it's Jene Aiko. It's a nice voice, even though there's still some auto tune on it there. I enjoyed that bit of singing. But it does say something about an album when the bit that I enjoy most is when the main star isn't involved. So for all these positives that I've got, I still, um, it's still hip hop, and it's still in a musically difficult place for me. Um, yeah, when I say that, it means it's stylistically it's stuff that I don't enjoy. There's still too much strong language that is too strong that I struggle with, but it does have qualities that I can recognise. So I'm a bit more balanced on this album than I have been with some of the rap albums that I reviewed. I'd love to know what you think of this album, so please do leave a comment, and that's it from me for now.
What are you so afraid of? Darling, you give, but you cannot take love.
Yeah, I needed to hear that. I hate when you're submissive, passive aggressive when we're